Thank you for joining us today. I am Carla Ghanem.
And I am Debbie Baker.
We're going to spend some time talking about alternative assessments, open pedagogy, and ways of us knowing what our students are really learning. We will start by defining open pedagogy. Then we will look at what learning in open pedagogy might look like and end with some alternative assessment suggestions. Let's start with open pedagogy. Definitions are important for a lot of the work we do. As educators, we want to know what our terms mean, and in many areas, definitions play a huge role. Robin DeRosa and Rajiv Jangiani invite us to ask a set of questions related to open pedagogy before we dive into the definition. What are hopes for education, particularly for higher education? What vision do you work toward when you design your daily professional practices in and out of the classroom? How do you see the roles of the learner and the teacher? What challenges do your students face in their learning environments, and how does your pedagogy address them? Pondering these questions, DeRosa and Jangiani then engage in open pedagogy as, quote, a site of praxis, a place where theories about learning, teaching, technology, and social justice enter into a conversation with each other and inform the development of educational practices and structures, unquote. They encourage consideration of hopes and aspirations for education rather than seeking a solidified definition. This way, open pedagogy is connected to many teaching and learning theories and the relationship to open educational resources. Even though defining open pedagogy can be challenging, there are some elements of open pedagogy that most seem to agree on. Open pedagogy assignments are renewable, not disposable. Renewable assignments have value beyond the classroom activity and are seen by and perhaps evaluated by an audience outside the classroom. Renewable assignments are typically those that can be revisited over time, perhaps by building on, enhancing, or responding to existing products, artifacts, or performances in such a way that it creates a new product, artifact, or performance. There are many approaches to what open pedagogy is. We recognize that there are a lot of scholars who have contributed to open pedagogy and its definition. For this presentation, we are approaching open pedagogy with the habits and values identified in Sinkinson and with the OER-enabled pedagogy evaluation provided by Wiley and Hilton. Sinkinson described 4 habits that she sought to encourage student development in and 4 aspects of pedagogy from literature about open pedagogy. The 4 primary habits embodying and inspiring students are empathy, participation, curiosity, and responsibility. We take responsibility for our choices to work in the open, and we reflect on how this work impacts those choices for ourselves and others. Similarly, we carefully decide how we wish to participate openly and how that might affect others. When working in open pedagogy, we hope to inspire curiosity and empathy when engaging with varied identities, perspectives, and cultures. With these habits in mind, Sinkinson discusses 4 values as their teaching values: access and equity, community and connection, opportunity and risk, and agency and ownership. Access and equity reduce barriers that prevent equitable access to education. Community and connection facilitates connections across boundaries of learning experiences, classrooms, campuses, communities, viewpoints, etc. This might include authentic student collaboration. Agency and ownership protects the agency and ownership of one's own learning experiences, choices of expression, and degrees of participation. And finally, risk and responsibility includes tools and practices that mediate learning, knowledge building, etc. When designing an open pedagogy assignment, we strategically blend elements of various learning designs in order to maximize opportunities for student development in these habits and values. An additional approach to open pedagogy that we would like to address today is Wiley and Hilton's OER-enabled pedagogy evaluation, which they presented in their article defining OER-enabled pedagogy. Their test allows us to determine whether a particular approach should be labeled OER-enabled pedagogy. One vital part of the practice is whether openly licensed resources are part of the practice. The test can then determine to what extent the specific teaching and learning practice qualifies as OER-enabled pedagogy. The four-part test asks the following. 1. Are students asked to create new artifacts, essays, poems, videos, songs, etc., or revise, remix existing OER? Does the artifact have value beyond supporting the learning of its author? Are the students invited to publicly share their new artifacts or revised, remixed OER? And are students invited to openly license their new artifacts or revised, remixed OER? Using the straightforward test allows us to focus on key elements of OER-enabled pedagogy as we draw upon various approaches to assessment to ensure students' learning in the open pedagogy environment. Let's take a look at what learning in open pedagogy entails.
So what does learning look like in open pedagogy? Here, our focus is not on the learning activities, but on the assessment of the learning students take away from those learning activities. Open pedagogy is the practice of engaging with the students as creators of information rather than simply consumers of it. You can look at it as a form of experiential learning in which students demonstrate their learning through the act of creation. Open pedagogy encourages agency, partnership, and ownership. A huge role in open pedagogy is placing the students at the center and allowing them to be part of the creative process and learning. It provides the students with agency. When we encourage students to become fully involved in the learning process, some amazing work will emerge. Open pedagogy also allows students to collaborate with faculty, other students, and the community. It allows students to enter a partnership with the outcome of reflective learning and peer reviews. Additionally, open pedagogy allows students to take ownership of the classroom and their own learning experiences, offering opportunities in which students can align the learning to their needs and own the experiences aids students in strengthening their agency. Agency, partnership, and ownership all lead to increased motivation and participation. We know how difficult it can be to motivate our students and keep them engaged and interested. Allowing them to take ownership and collaborate aids in increasing their motivation and participation. Furthermore, this type of learning also improves critical thinking, reflective, and collaborative skills. One way for students to have agency and ownership in their learning experience is by involving them in the development of a rubric, in establishing criteria for meeting the assignment tasks, and in what it looks like when those criteria are not met, and what it looks like to exceed the criteria. Rubrics identify criteria as the individual aspects that will be assessed, descriptors, characteristics of each criteria, and performance levels. What does quality look like at different rating levels? Collaborate with the students in the design of how they will be assessed. Listen to and build on their ideas. And if their ideas and your ideas of what quality should look like are wildly different, find out why and make adjustments. In addition to involving students in defining assignment quality, peer review can be included in your assessment strategy. Peer review is one way to provide students with feedback throughout the learning process. It doesn't replace instructor feedback, but complements it. When students are both involved in the design of the assessment rubric and in the application of that rubric, they are likely able to provide feedback and ask questions that can lead to improvement on the final product prior to the final assessment. For many students, the use of a rubric to provide constructive feedback may be a new experience, and they need to be taught how to do this. We recommend practicing this skill in learning activities or one or more low stakes assignments prior to a peer review session with high stakes. Using peer review as a practice enhances collaborative and reflective skills. It allows students to enter into a partnership with their peers. When you think about scaffolding toward an authentic assessment experience involving students in defining the assessment quality, writing a rubric, and in peer review, applying the rubric, could be scaffolded steps towards a final, authentic, public assessment of an open pedagogy assignment, where students are expected to publicly share their final product. We know that there are many assessment types and techniques that can be used. Very often we find ourselves as educators using the same assessments we know over and over again. One thing to always keep in mind is making sure the assessments align with our objectives. If we are truly wanting to increase motivation and participation and improve critical thinking, reflective, and collaborative skills, all of which are open pedagogy driven, then we might need to think outside the box and move away from traditional multiple choice question tests, summative assessments, things like that. Alternative assessments align very nicely with open pedagogy practices. Let's take a look at what alternative assessments are. Today we're going to cover 3 alternative assessments: authentic, performance, and holistic assessments. Grant Wiggins, in his article, The Case for Authentic Assessment, claims that authentic assessments allow us to directly examine student performance on worthy intellectual tasks. Authentic assessments allow for real-world problems to be solved. They are relevant to the learner's experiences in life, enhance critical thinking skills, and empower students, giving them agency. Authentic assessment places assessment into real-world settings and contexts. In an authentic assessment environment, students are evaluated on their application of skills, knowledge, and abilities. Authentic assessment can take the form of performance assessment, where students in one environment perform in front of a new audience. In open pedagogy, an authentic assessment approach is the publicly sharing aspect. After all, students in an open pedagogy assignment are invited to publicly share their final artifact or newly created product. When this goes beyond sharing publicly to inviting that public audience to critique the student's work, it crosses into the authentic assessment environment. Performance assessments are another alternative assessment approach that applies to open pedagogy. Performance assessments allow students to apply their acquired skills and knowledge immediately. Performance assessments measure one or more specific skills. They are complex, authentic, process or product-oriented, open-ended, and time-bound. Additionally, they challenge students to use their higher order thinking skills to create a product or complete a process. They can require students to complete a task that closely mirrors the responsibilities of a professional, for example, artist, engineer, laboratory technician, etc. Performance assessments might include students performing in front of an audience outside the classroom, and it is this public sharing aspect that moves the performance assessment closer to open pedagogy. And lastly, holistic assessments. Holistic assessments are used widely in health sciences and career and technical education programs. They are extremely important in those areas due to their nature of considering the whole condition. A holistic assessment focuses on assessing the learning, not the final product. And a holistic assessment approach may include scaffolding, low stakes, no stakes formative assessments throughout the learning process. In a holistic assessment approach, the focus is on achieving or even mastering the identified learning objectives and not the actual format of the learning. For example, if the identified learning objective focuses on evaluating resources for the local community living below the poverty line, then the holistic assessment approach evaluates the student's resources rather than the actual presentation of the resources. for example, essay, presentation, infographic, etc. The three presented alternative assessments, authentic, performance, and holistic assessments, allow for students' agency, partnership, and ownership, and therefore empower the students to play a role in the creative process and learning, an integral part of open pedagogy. We would like to point out that assessment is not grading, and grades are not the same as assessment. Alternative assessment approaches such as these focus on student learning rather than just evaluating the product presentation. Alternative assessments ask, did the student achieve the learning objectives set out in the assessment, rather than evaluating, does this infographic have pictures on it? Alternative assessments can be scary for students. However, they can also increase their engagement with the learning and increase the quality of their work. Alternative assessments do not look like the traditional assessments that students may be familiar with, and traditional study techniques may not work for students. Suddenly, the work has meaning beyond the classroom. In traditional assessment, the curriculum drives the assessment. While in alternative assessment, it's the other way around. The assessment drives the curriculum, and by extension, the learning, student engagement, and investment. The assessment provides for student agency and ownership, risk, and responsibility, all of which aren't easy. Be prepared to help students through the process. To scaffold the tasks they will need to complete. Vygotsky proposed a learning zone of proximal development, suggesting that for every concept or skill, there is a place wherein an individual is highly comfortable with their knowledge and abilities, and a place where the individual is able to learn a new concept or skill with help, which is the optimal place for learning to occur. Scaffolding activities allows for students to build new knowledge and skills in steps, achieving understanding and maybe even mastery before moving on to the next, slightly more complex task. And scaffolding isn't only necessary for learning academic knowledge. Scaffolding might be needed for guiding students through problem solving, speaking in public, critical thinking, resource management, etc. Alternative assessment, such as can be found in authentic assessment, performance assessment, and holistic assessment, can be the tipping point from a disposable assignment to a renewable assignment. Here are a few examples of alternative assessment style products: case analysis, instruction manual, diagram, role play, client report, clinical evaluations, and interviews. The product is not what makes it an alternative assessment tool. Rather, it is the approach to the assessment of that final product. Who will read, evaluate, and react to the case analysis, instruction manual, or client report? What changes will the interviews lead to? How will the role play experience inform the real world experience? What meaningful skills, knowledge, abilities, and learning do students take away from the process, not just the product? Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions.